Good morning, everyone. Market research began nearly a century ago to fill a very specific need. Marketers needed information to make better business decisions. That information didn't exist, so the industry grew up to develop that information. The methods have evolved over time, and specialized skill sets have developed. But the basic reason for being for market research never really changed. Until now. We no longer live in a world where information is rare. In contrast, we are overwhelmed with data all around us. This represents the most fundamental challenge ever to the basic business model of market research. It is unclear where we are going to end up as an industry. Some have proclaimed the end of surveys to be replaced by big data analyses. Others disagree. It is not our purpose today to adjudicate between the new and the old. Change is happening, and it may not matter what the defenders of the old think. Let me remind you of a quote from Max Planck, one of the originators of quantum mechanics of the early 20th century. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents essentially die, and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. This quote should be very concerning for many of the people in the room if you think about the implications for yourselves. Our concern is what is going to happen to all of you out there and the companies you work for, given the changes ahead of us. Which of you will adapt and prosper in this new world, and which of you will fall by the wayside? What are the new mindsets and skill sets that will be needed? Now, to help us answer these questions, we have assembled a very distinguished panel. And I'd like to welcome them to the stage. Paul Donato, who's the Chief Research Officer for Nielsen. Kathy McGettrick, who's the Senior VP of Market Development, IBM Sales and Distribution. And Jerry Wind, who's the Lauder Professor of Marketing at the Wharton School.
First of all, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. As Larry said, everybody is talking about change. We know change is here. I don't think we want to talk more about change. What we want to talk about is what does it mean to the people who work in this industry. So along those lines, imagine you didn't do what you do. Imagine you were career coaches. And you were coaching people, these people who work in the research industry, who'd been in the industry 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be. What advice would you give them today about how to give themselves the best opportunity for a robust career in research? Who would like to start? Kathy.
Sure. So first of all, I would say, in my view, there's a ton of opportunity for all of you out there. And I think what you need to do to capitalize on that opportunity is very, very basic, actually. Not a lot of mystery to it. It's something that you would hear from any generic career coach in terms of networking and staying abreast of changes in technology, continuing to enhance your skill set. The way that I see what's happening to the market research industry right now, there's sort of a new trinity that's emerging. You have primary research, which I think is very viable and will continue to be very viable going forward. You have analytics, and you have the social component. The value, I think, is really in the alchemy of those three things and in finding the business meaning for the particular business that you all are working in. So it doesn't mean that as a researcher you need to become an analytics guru, but you need to go find that analytics guru at your company or outside your company, and you need to make friends with them and understand how you can merge what you do with what they do to really find the meaning for your business, right? So it's all about reaching out, networking, understanding possibilities. I like to tell my team, no naked research, guys. Naked research, research standing on its own without context, that's where we get into trouble. You need the business context, and beyond the business context, you now have the opportunity for these other two elements of my trinity, the social and the analytic. Bring those into the fold, find the meaning at the nexus of the trinity. That would be my advice.
Excellent. Paul.
Okay, let's stop with all the scary stuff. Change is great. No change, no research. Research lives for change. That's why everyone needs us. I loved Gail's speech this morning, but I'm, finding a place at the table. We deserve to be at the table because we provide the insights that will get us through this change. My advice, much of what Gail said, listen to what clients are saying and what their problems are. And if they tell you anything like they're telling us, yes, it's true, most of our major clients want more and more of their insights to come from listening with quotes, but listening in a broad sense, and that in no way says that panels are going to go away. I think panels plus listening are the kind of perfect complement for a holistic view of the world. But listening in its broad sense is not just social and not just buzz, but it includes the integration of databases that are particularly part of the process, like scanner data with loyalty data or mobility data. And it is going to take some new skill sets, and most of you in your careers are probably too old to learn some of these skill sets. So instead, as researchers, as the general...
I beg to differ.
Sorry. I take it back, I never said that. But I see research as the general contractor, as the person who really understands how to put all the pieces together. And those pieces, those new skills, are things like MATLAB programming. SPSS, SAS, great, but there are new tools out there that younger generations are learning in school. Cognitive science, neuroscience, satellite imagery. These are all high technology tools that will provide those listening insights that our clients are looking for. And you as the general contractor have to know enough about them to be able to hire well in those fields and to be able to manage those really diverse set of specialists.
Jerry.
I'll take on Paul's point on new skill sets. I think that fundamentally almost every one of us here has to continuously reinvent ourselves. The challenge is really to start thinking about in terms of lifelong education and how do we continuously reinvent ourselves, because consumers are becoming more and more empowered and skeptical that we just saw the new technology, new advances there all the time, which has huge implications. And we cannot just kind of continue doing what we've been doing in the past. So I think in general, there are two options here. Some of you may want to become the specialist in a particular area and become the world leaders in this particular area, and you have this expertise. Many of you may become more of an integrators who try to integrate a different type of skills and approaches, keeping in mind that the ultimate objective is really to provide reliable, valid, actionable, and timely information to management so they can make better decisions. In this context, how you become more of storytellers, how do you really become more of part of a decision process as opposed to just throwing some information out there. And I think it will require some significant retooling, rethinking what we currently do. And in general, I would suggest to start thinking about different research methods more in terms of and as opposed to A versus B, but rather A and B, and how do we integrate them? Because the key will be conversions, whether it's the conversion of mobile and social, whether it is the text mining with surveys, and how do we address some of the big problems in each one of these domains, like non-response bias with respect to survey, which is huge. An increasing number of consumers do not want to participate. So I think it's a great opportunity for all of us kind of to reinvent ourselves and kind of prepare ourselves for this new reality.
Kathy, you said an interesting word before. You said alchemy, which makes me wonder if a new title in research is the insights alchemist. And if it is, what do people need to do to be that?
Well, when I think of an alchemist, what is an alchemist, right? An alchemist is a scientist who takes a set of raw materials and in and of themselves are not super valuable, but it's that special skill that this scientist has in bringing those together that creates a precious metal, right? And this is what I think all of us are capable of doing. So that's the way that I think of the alchemy. An insights alchemist basically would be someone who reaches out beyond the walls of one kind of raw material, looks for the other raw materials that are out there that are pertinent to the work that they're doing. And I'll tell you, when I say raw materials, I don't only mean the various methodologies and tools that are out there. There are tons of those, and I even, you've got the social, you've got the traditional primary research, you've got this analytics. One of the key components of the alchemy really is this notion of having a business context and of understanding what matters to your stakeholders, your sponsors, and being able to take the raw materials from a methodology perspective and meld that in with the business context so that then you can actually produce something that says, hey, look, here's what we learned in the research. This is unique. You didn't know this before. The step that I always find to be the most powerful, and I think the thing that keeps us all viable, is the ability to say, this is what we learned. Here's what you need to do. So if I was going to name someone an insights alchemist, I would say, make sure you bring every component of the raw materials together, not only the tools, the methodologies, and that piece of it, but also this notion of the business context and using that set of tools to translate with the business context into the meaning for your stakeholder.
Good. Okay. Both Paul and I work for two of the largest global market research companies that are around. What is all this change that is taking place? What does this mean for the big global market research companies? Do we think that they have a bright future? Is there a dim future for them? Are they going to be replaced by the new upstart companies that we see all around us? What do you think?
I think they have a great future. I'm sure you agree also. The future for the large globals, I think what they need to do moving forward is, number one, on an operations basis, build global operating systems, global business systems. And it's not about cost, it's about quality. We do business in 100 countries, similar businesses to yours, measuring retail, measuring consumer, measuring television audiences. And if you're really decentralized, then you really have no control over the standards and methods that are used in the 98th and 99th countries. So globalizing your business services really helps with quality. And I think that you mentioned something about, is it the age of the boutique shops? That scale that globalization creates is a good thing, but it also kind of creates an image that you're not as nimble as the smaller shops. And what a lot of clients have said to us when they hear about some of the stuff that we're doing, and I'm sure some of the things that your firm is also doing, that they had no idea that we're working with some of these technologies, and that they do work with small shops, but their concern with small shops is their ability to scale up across the globe. So whether you partner with those small shops, whether you acquire them, or whether you build it yourself, I think firms like ours have to be conspicuously innovative. So that people know that we have both scale and innovation.
Okay. Kathy, as the representative from the advertiser here, what do you think about that?
As a representative, I'm sorry, say that.
From the advertiser side.
From the advertiser side? Well, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I hear his words, we often hear similar kinds of comments in terms of IBM and the way that we work with our own set of clients, right? So there's a dynamic and the ability to be, as a big company, you need to be nimble, and we are always looking for our options. But I think a big company can, if they inject the element of an entrepreneurial spirit, we can offer a similar kind of a dynamic. So I would agree with that statement.
Okay.
I think it really depends. I think that kind of Paul's optimism really depends on the leadership of the company and how willing they will be to try to continuously innovate. And the history of large company innovating has not been that great. If you look at in general in terms of innovations, most of them come from people from outside the industry. It was not Nokia that is dominating today the mobile phone, but rather Apple. So the question is, will the large research firms realize the need to not just continue what they're doing, but rather to innovate continuously, to adopt new technology, to test, and develop new skills? I think that in today's environment, it's absolutely a must that everyone consider much more experimentation. Experimentation is critical. You can do it much cheaper. You can do it much faster. You can look at the changes in what's happening in terms of startups, how much easier it is to have a startup today compared to 10 years ago because of the speed and ease of experimentation. Most research firms don't have the skill. And so to what extent you start developing the skill and working with companies on this. So I think the future can be very bright, but it really requires to avoid the traditional arrogance of large, successful companies and become much more innovative and open to new ideas and new approaches.
I think you're absolutely right. It really is a function of the leadership in the company. If the leadership takes a top-down approach to ensuring that both the culture and the attitude of the company is towards risk-taking and entrepreneurial spirit, and they also have to help out by creating certain environments which encourage that entrepreneurial and spirit.
You know, as people navigate their careers now, one of the factors they'll have to think about is how prepared is the company I'm going to be able to compete in this new industry and give me these opportunities to become an alchemist of sorts. So imagine you were, I'm the projective question guy today, imagine you were investing your own money in a market research company of the future. What type of company would that be that you think would attract the best talent moving forward? Sure.
I probably will invest in a portfolio of companies as opposed to a single one. I will start with a gaming company. I think that one of the absolutely missed opportunities in marketing research is to design games that through the action of the players, they will basically get the information and insight they want. Games have a magic, not in terms of gamification, all the gimmicks around it, but rather in terms of the almost addictive nature of the game to people. So look at the engagement of people in games compared to in market research surveys, uncomparable. So I will try basically to start looking at companies who are in the game area and can adapt them to marketing research. That's one example. Yeah. And look at other technologies, whether it's augmented realities and others, and try to look at how can we take these specific skills and turn them around. That's one set of companies. The other one will be companies that integrate. The companies that basically know how to integrate the text mining with the traditional other research approaches, single source data, how do you kind of link it with analytics, but then take it to the next step in terms of more friendly dashboards and almost storytelling. You know, kind of in a sense, a skill that has kind of been lost in many of the research firms in terms of how do you tell a story from what you found out to try to engage management so you could really have an impact.
Are there companies that are doing that now?
Not too many.
Yeah. Paul, what do you think?
Can I say a company just like Nielsen? Or WPP? I'm going to restrict it to research, you know, kind of the research environment. But I would look for companies that have those global business systems because right now most of our clients' growth is coming from the developing world. And so you've got to be able to use technology to develop low-cost methodologies because while the revenue is not high, that's where really all the growth is coming. So also technology, a company that has a good use of technology, investing in technology, and can scale up that technology. And then finally, and very importantly, a company that is committed to innovation by virtue of the tools and the structure that it has put into place. It's not just saying innovation is a value of the company, but have actually taken steps to support that entrepreneurial spirit.
If I was going to start a company, I think first and foremost I would choose to focus very narrowly in an industry that was in turmoil, an industry that was turbulent, where there was change happening constantly. I might look at technology, I might look at pharmaceutical. I would pick an industry like that, and I would start, in essence, a business consultancy that had as its differentiating aspect market research and the voice of the customer. And I would get a balance of people on my team, people that understood the latest technologies in terms of voice of the customer, some of what Jerry mentioned, some of what others have talked about on stage here already this morning. And I would balance those people with business consultants out of that particular industry so that then I could do this neat alchemy, the marriage between that business understanding in that very unique band of an industry, with the research and the analytic capabilities. That would be the kind of company that I would start.
So as people try and navigate this, give me one thing you would tell people they should do tomorrow to help prepare them. Because we're all talking about stretching, right? Stretching skills, stretching comfort. So Paul, give me one thing you would tell someone to do tomorrow that would help them along this pathway.
I think it goes back to listening to the client. Make sure you completely understand what the client's problems and needs are and where their growth opportunities are. And make sure you've got, if you don't have the skill sets, and many of us won't because we're mid or late career, make sure you have the capacity to know what skills are necessary and to hire those and manage those. And ironically, I really do mean this, those highly specialized skills aren't necessarily always the best researchers. They're very technical, but they don't put together the big picture the way I think we as general contractors can.
Kathy?
I think the biggest thing for right now is building context. Build a business context so that the work that you do from a science perspective, from the research perspective, can then be translated into business value. If you don't do that now, that would be number one, I think, on my list.
What about you, Jerry?
Experiment. Continue doing what you're doing about 90% of your time. Take 10%, experiment with totally new approaches, especially approaches that might make your current approach obsolete. If you'll experiment, you'll be able to take more risk. You'll realize that basically the best place to learn is from failure, and will create even a culture of kind of within yourself or in the company of much more of innovation. So I would say experiment, experiment, experiment.
Okay. Kathy, IBM certainly went through wrenching change over a long period of time and became one of the more interesting business cases because it came out very successfully on the other side of the change from hardware to software. What lessons do you think we could learn in the market research industry, given the changes that are in front of us? What lessons from that could we take to heart? What were the skill sets of the people like you who came out on the good side? I think, remember, you told us a few weeks ago that you started off selling mainframe computers.
I did.
And it's a very different world for you right now.
Right.
So how would you translate that into what we could learn here?
Yeah, so I think at its most basic, what IBM has done over the last decade or so is we have gone from a company that focused on information technology problems to a company that focuses on business problems. And so back when I started selling mainframe computers, IBM was 80% about mainframes and hardware and 20% about software and services. And that worked back then because that was where our clients were deriving value, right? And what we realized was that the value equation for our clients was changing. The kinds of challenges that they were facing were changing. And that meant that we needed to shift from this 80-20 into where we are now, which is really more of a 20% on the hardware and the systems and 80% on software and services, and the ability then to offer help in the realm of business problems. And I see, a very good analog there in terms of IBM and where this industry is right now. If you think about it, from a business model perspective, and we all should think, I think, about our personal business model. IBM flipped their business model or our business model on its head. I see the 80% for the group here and for myself as kind of the traditional set of research approaches, the 20% being this kind of burgeoning set of approaches that is out there, like the social and the analytic. And I think over time, and it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, and it really obviously cannot happen tomorrow, but I think over time, we all need to be kind of cognizant of how we're moving ourselves in that direction so that we have more of a balance away from the more traditional and toward some of these newer approaches and this notion of the alchemy, right? And the other thing that I think is important in terms of the analog between IBM and this industry is IBM never abandoned mainframes or hardware or technology, right? We kind of surfed that wave over the last decade or so, and it's still a very, very important component of our business. So what does that mean in terms of our little analogy here this morning? It means nobody here needs to, abandon primary research, right? Primary research is always going to be a central component of the value that we deliver to our stakeholders, but we all should be thinking about that balance and the notion of bringing our skill sets up, into currency and even looking ahead, and this notion of the alchemy. And that would be the way that I would answer that question.
Great,
Okay?
that's really helpful. I just have a couple of summary slides that, thank you. Can we put the slides up? So I like quotes, so I had to put a quote in. Someone has to do something. It's just incredibly pathetic, and it has to be us. Jerry Garcia. For the millennials in the room, you can ask a boomer why that's funny. The ARF, the AMA, MRA, CASRO, they're going to work really hard to try and move the industry forward. But at the end of the day, it has to be organic change that happens with us, especially if we're trying to maintain careers in this industry. So two things that I think summarize this. One is I call the 1% challenge. If you're a budget manager and you have market research budget, what I want you to think about is taking 1% of your budget and dedicating it for experimentation, what our panel has been talking about today. Do new methodologies you've never done before. Try things out. See how they work together. See how they don't work. Try and fail, and then learn from that failure and move on. And if you're not a budget manager, you need to raise your hand and volunteer for things. If you're a lifelong qual person, figure out what you're going to do with big data. If you're a survey guy, figure out when you hear that someone's doing a social media exercise in your company, raise your hand and say you want to be a part of that. The only way you get comfortable with these methods is you start doing them and you figure out how they go together. We have 52 seconds. Does anyone have one question? Nobody. Okay, we gave 50 seconds back to the ARF this morning. Okay, thank you all to our panel.